Following Sebastian Aho signing his 8-year contract extension, he and Dom Waddell held a press conference earlier this afternoon. We give our takeaways from Aho, from Waddell, as well as what is next for the Hurricanes going forward, all in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by the lovely folks over at FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And as we said earlier, the Carolina Hurricanes and Sebastian Aho have reached a contract extension. We went in depth in it in today's other episode, and my co-host Andrew is here with me as always. And Waddell and Aho held a press conference shortly after we got done recording our first episode of the day, and you went back and listened and watched to that press conference, and you had a lot of takeaways from that. And we're going to start off with the man of the hour, the birthday boy, really, because not only did he sign a 8-year, $78 million contract extension, Sebastian Aho also turned 26 years old today. And again, like I said, we're going to start off with him. And Andrew, what were your takeaways from Sebastian Aho in the press conference this afternoon?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, in just watching that and listening to him, it's been really cool to see since he's been here, the past 7 years, which really even just hearing that is like crazy to think about. Sebastian Aho has already been with the Hurricanes for 7 years. Just remembering going back to him as a rookie. I remember I was covering the team at the time. I remember interviewing him as a rookie. He worked really hard, to get better and better in his interviews as a rookie. And just seeing him from then until now, how much more comfortable and confident he is in speaking and answering questions and really taking on that, more leadership role and speaking on behalf of the entire team is really cool to see the way that he's grown in that regard. I mean, it's just watching him today. He's just so well spoken, and it's just night and day different from when he was, an 18, 19-year-old kid first breaking into the NHL. So that's one immediate overall takeaway that I think that's been really cool to see with him.
Yeah, I agree. And that's definitely been something that you just kind of notice year after year, just how he keeps getting better and better with these interviews, getting better with his English. Because I remember as well, whenever he first came in, and you could tell at times he'd struggle, and he's gotten so much better at it. And while you were talking, I did do some quick math real quick, because like you said, it's been 7 years already, and then you add 9 more on top of that, the 8-year extension plus this next one. When all is said and done, at the end of this deal, he will have been a Hurricane for 16 years, and that is crazy to think about. His NHL career could get its driver's license when this deal is all said and done. And what were some other takeaways you had from Aho's press conference?
Yeah, the first question he got, I think that was interesting, was from Corey Lavalette of the North State Journal and The Athletic, and it was, what makes this a successful contract? And, hearing from Aho, he just said, this is the place that I want to play. This is where I want to be. He talked about the organization taking huge steps over the last 5 years, building every year, getting better and better, getting to be a consistent playoff team. He talked about Brind'amour being the only coach he wants to play for, how his, connection, all of that, plus his connections with his teammates, his connections with the fan base, made it a very easy decision for him to re-sign here. So I think, that's another speaks to how far the Hurricanes have come over this span of, hearing that from a star player, that this is a destination, this is where they want to be, this is where they want to build their career. And, we'll get to this some in Waddell's and the takeaways from the Waddell press conference as well, because it's really neat to hear that, especially from Aho, because he's been, front and center of this whole thing, of this building process. We've had the debate, you can pick between him and Jacob Slavin for the Hurricanes team MVP over the years, but certainly Aho right there leading the charge for this whole thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I saw a comment on our episode prior to this one of someone pointing out how you get this pick in the second round and it turns into your first line centering your franchise player. That's not something that happens very often with NHL teams. And he has been front and center for all of this. We've said it many times. There's three core guys that the Hurricanes have. It's Sebastian Aho, it's Andrei Svechnikov, and it's Jacob Slavin. And they got, like you said in today's other episode, they have two of those three guys locked down long term. And Jacob Slavin, his turn will come next summer, whenever his extension comes due. And we've obviously both been fans of the Hurricanes for a very, very, very long time. And we remember the days where, this was not a destination for guys to come. It was where they just happened to get stuck. And it is very nice to hear, a star player like Sebastian Aho say that this is where he wants to be. And it's nice sometimes, just to hear that with, the franchise having come back from what it has come back from.
Yeah, definitely. And you hear from Sebastian Aho, that the only choice he had in his mind was that he wanted to sign with the Hurricanes. That it was a no-brainer for him to keep playing for the Canes. The earlier, the better. He wanted to get it done before the season. That the talks started really well. Talks started pretty quickly after the season. This is just something that he wanted, something the team wanted. It was a really easy decision, it sounds like, to get it done. And it is cool, and it's obviously a departure from the way things went the last time with the offer sheet, that it was just, nope, we're getting this done. He's signing with the Hurricanes. That's it.
Yeah, and like you said, that's it. Obviously, today with the deal getting announced, that tweet of Montreal announcing that he had signed the offer sheet, that's been making the rounds today. So that's obviously fun to relive that. But the fact that they're just able to get this done now, and like I said, when all is said and done with this particular deal, he'll have been a Hurricane for 16 years. And, he'll be in his mid 30s at that point. So, this could be one that, it could be like his last, like, big deal too, because of just where it's going to take him in terms of his career. Maybe he signs another little short-term deal after that, and plays another couple years. But this kind of all but, well, I wouldn't say all but guarantees, because again, mid 30s, he could still have a few more years on the end of it, but he's going to play 90% of his NHL career with the Hurricanes at that point, by the time everything is said and done with this contract.
Yeah, and the other thing that I thought was really interesting from hearing from Aho is, the Hurricanes have had a pretty good offseason so far. I mean, bringing in Dmitry Orlov, bringing in Michael Bunting. They brought back Tony DeAngelo yesterday. They, re-signed a bunch of their guys to bargain deals. This is really the first time we've heard from Dom Waddell quite a bit. This is really the first time we've heard from any of that core group of players about the offseason that the Hurricanes had. And, Aho said that he felt like this was the best team on paper that the Hurricanes have had, and that's one of the reasons it was an easy decision to sign. He kind of said, all you can ask for from your team is a chance to win, and he feels like the Canes have the chance to go out there and be the best team in the league this year. And ultimately, I think, obviously he wanted to make his money. He wanted to get the best deal he could for himself, but we've heard Sebastian Aho is a competitor. He would not have signed this deal if he didn't think staying in Carolina was going to give him a good chance to win the Stanley Cup. And I feel like he's confident, in the direction of the team that they can get that done at some point.
Yeah, it really is a big sign that this team, they're in a position where they can win. We've talked about that a lot. It feels over this offseason with deals that have been signed this offseason, trades that have been made, and then moves over the past couple seasons. Just how like we said earlier, this has become a destination for guys. Whereas, like we said, used to be a guy where players just played because they couldn't play anywhere else. And we look at Sebastian Aho. He's the big name that everyone's talking about right now. Talked about it earlier in the offseason. Jordan Staal. He obviously is in the twilight of his career. This is more than likely going to be his last deal that he signed. So he's going to want to have a chance to get that second ring and want to do it in a place where he can win. And he decided he's going to stay here. And Brent Burns waiving his no trade clause to come here last season. And we've kept talking about it all offseason. Erik Karlsson, he's a guy he wanted to get traded to a contender. And the Hurricanes, still as of right now, are still reportedly in the mix on that too. So the fact that they can be a draw for these star players, it's a great thing. And like you said, to hear it come from a franchise player like Sebastian Aho is great to hear.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing, you mentioned Jordan Staal. The last thing I want to touch on with what Aho talked about in his presser today, it's kind of cool. We've talked about how much a guy like Justin Williams meant to the start of this current era of success that the Hurricanes are in and what he was able to do. We talked about Sebastian Aho now really taking over more and more, making this his team, taking on more of that leadership role and potentially being a future captain. He talked about, how blessed he felt to be able to learn about how to be a leader from just guys like Justin Williams and Jordan Staal. So that was really kind of cool and sort of a full circle moment to, Aho was still learning and growing as a young player when this current run of success started. And now he's that guy who's taking on more of a leading role. And there's other younger guys in the fold that are learning from him now.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. It really, really is, seeing, I guess you would say the old guard, starting to move on. And, like you said, Justin Williams, Jordan Staal, those guys that were like the really young guys, at the start of all this are now becoming the leaders on the team. And, essentially, they're before too long, it's gonna be Sebastian Aho. He's gonna be the future captain. I think we both share in that sentiment. I know we've seen a lot of that online today of with this deal that pretty much guarantees after the next 4 seasons, it's going to be him, if they don't do a little transition period thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, and we also did get to hear from Don Waddell in this press conference, so as well as Sebastian Aho, and we will get into what Don Waddell had to say in the press conference right after this quick break, folks. Now, folks, it is baseball season, and you guys know how much we love baseball here. You see us wearing baseball shirts all the time, whether it be the Kansas City Royals, the Detroit Tigers, what have you. You guys know we love baseball. And if you love baseball too, regardless of your favorite team, you can take your first swing at betting on the MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And if you're a Royals or Tigers fan like us, then, you're going to be in a good spot there. And because that's $200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit fanduel.com/locked on to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Now, getting back into the Dom Waddell press conference, and because it's always good to hear from Don, even though sometimes he can be a man of few words, of not, given a whole lot to work with when it comes to press conferences. But as always, we're still going to dive into those. But Andrew, what were some of your takeaways from Don Waddell's press conference?
Yeah, I mean, he talked about, a lot of what we just talked about with Aho, that, they started to build this thing 5 years ago, and Aho was, with putting some great pieces in place, and he specifically called Sebastian Aho the #1 piece that's been put in place. He said, no disrespect to anybody else, but like we've been saying with this whole thing, he's the guy. That is why it was such a priority to get him locked up today, that when you're building a team, you want to build it around great players and also great people like him, that it was an easy decision for them to go with the 8 years to lock him in. And also, again, what we've reiterated, that just knowing how important Aho is, they really wanted to get this done this summer and not have to sit on it all year throughout the season and hope they could get it done at the end of the season. Now there's no stress, there's no worry, there's no drama. Your top guy, your franchise center is here. He is here for the next 9 years. If you are not, that is not a concern. I'd have to imagine getting this officially done today is probably a major load. I mean, I'm sure he's still got plenty of things on his mind as an NHL general manager, but this has to be a major load off of Dom Waddell's mind today.
Yeah, 100%. It's got to be a big load off of him because, one thing, I thought about earlier today after we recorded our first episode was that, they're able to get it done now. Obviously, we've had our frustrations with the flat cap, but they're able to get it done now with the flat cap in place, because we've seen how that's affected contracts this offseason already across the league. But you're getting that done now as opposed to next offseason when the cap is expected to rise. And you're that in a way gives them a little bit more. I what's the word I'm looking for? Makes it a little bit more easy for them to get the salary to a good spot, because like we were saying earlier, this is one that easily could have hit a 10 million AAV, and they were able to keep it under 10. So the fact that they're able to do that, because who knows what this season is going to have. He could have another all-star caliber season, have a great run in the playoffs, and then that drive it up even higher. So the fact that they're able to get it done now is always a good thing. Now let's hope obviously this isn't going to happen. He's not going to fall off a cliff, but like I said, you're just able to get it done now, out of the way, not having to worry about it for the next 9 years.
Yeah, I think, it's going to be, I said, I think that's a really good thing. Like you mentioned, this is something that if you let it play out, teams have gotten burned in the past.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in every sport, really. You see it in
Yeah.
hockey. You've seen it in the NFL. I'll just give an example of my Chiefs. I mean, a couple different times in the mid 2010s with defensive stars like Justin Houston and Eric Berry, they didn't lock them up before the contract year. And yes, there's a saying in sports: the contract year is undefeated. Sebastian Aho goes into that contract year and he goes out there this season and puts up 100 points.
It's going to drive up price.
You ain't getting him for under 10 million if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Exactly.
it's a shrewd piece of business for the Hurricanes. And he also talked about how good they feel going forward, having all these young guys like Aho, Svechnikov, Kokoniemi locked up as a really good start to their long-term piece at forward. He talks some more about some other guys that we'll get to in the next segment about what is next for the Hurricanes, but definitely they're off to a good start here.
Yeah, off to a great start. And like you said, there are other guys that Waddell did talk about, and we'll get to those in a second. But one other name that just popped in my head of being a guy that's going to be coming due for an extension here soon is Seth Jarvis. And he's another guy that I think could be a really important piece of this team going forward, locking up the young guys long term. But that's one we'll talk about more as time goes on, because one thing that I do like about what they're doing right now, locking up Aho, locking up Svechnikov, locking up Kokiniemi, and then next offseason they're going to lock up Jacob Slavin. Having these really talented players locked up long term can really help them whenever it's time to reload roster spots. Having these guys that folks want to come play with, to be like, figure when Brent Burns retires, they're gonna need another defenseman to pair with Jacob Slavin, another offensive minded defenseman to pair with Jacob Slavin. And the fact that you have the best defensive defenseman locked up long term, that can be a really good thing when it comes to drawing free agents, getting guys to waive no trade clauses, having these really good players locked up long term, not just for 1 or 2 years. The fact that they're going to have that is really good.
Yeah, definitely. They're setting themselves up in a good place going forward.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, there's some other guys that Waddell talked about in the press conference, and we will dive into those names right after this quick break, folks. All right, folks, we are back, and it is time to talk about some other names that were talked about during the press conference this afternoon, because the Hurricanes do have some other guys that have contracts coming up sooner rather than later. And what did Don Waddell have to say about these guys, Andrew?
Yeah, the thing that I thought was interesting was he mentioned when he was talking about the young forwards that they've already got locked in Aho, Svechnikov, Kokoniemi. He then pivoted specifically to two guys that are going to be RFAs next offseason in Martin Necas and Seth Jarvis, and wanting to get them locked in long term. Just because they're going to be RFAs, I don't think you're going to see the Hurricanes sign either of those guys to extensions this offseason. They're probably going to want to see what happens with both of them going into next season. They're going to have plenty of leverage with both, with them being RFAs, as we've talked about in the past. We saw last offseason, I don't think Necas actually got his contract signed until August. So but it does sound like they're viewed as long-term pieces of the puzzle that the Hurricanes want to keep around long-term. And I certainly agree. You saw what Jarvis did this past year. You saw what Necas did with his bounce back. I honestly feel like we talk about the Hurricanes for next year, wanting to add external scoring, wanting all these things, adding Orlov, adding Bunting, what that's going to do to make the team better. I still think they should look to add some external scoring if they can, but I also think we're discounting. I think Seth Jarvis could really have that big, consistent breakout year next year playing with Sebastian Aho and really bring even more to the table for the Hurricanes. So that's a contract negotiation that, depending on what happens with him next year, is going to be interesting in the future.
Yeah, it is because, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility of them getting extensions done now this offseason, or I think what would be more likely if it's going to happen before the start of next offseason. I do think that you could potentially see a mid-season type move. We did see that with Jesper Kotkaniemi a couple years ago. They just signed it, in mid-season. I think, if things are going well, you could definitely see that happening. But like you said, the Hurricanes do have a lot of leverage in these situations. But I also agree with you. I think, Seth Jarvis, he is a guy that could be really dangerous when it comes to scoring there on that top line with Sebastian Aho, Marty Necas. He's coming off of a 70-plus point season. So both these guys are heading into contract years, and we can see what happens with them, how they decide to show out this year, because I think it's a very strong possibility for these guys to continue to take steps forward in their career.
Yeah, I do as well. I think that's going to be another key facet for the Hurricanes going forward. The other one, obviously, there are other guys, big key guys that this offseason that they're looking at that are going to be UFAs after next year. The main three being Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, Teuvo Teravainen. Dom Waddell did say that they've spoken with all of those players and their representative. Well, probably not with the players, with their agents, but they're not close with any of them on extensions. Said there's different markets for different players. The Hurricanes are a salary cap team, but you are limited by that salary cap, so they have to figure that out. That, to me, it feels like I don't think we're going to see extensions for any of those guys this offseason. I really don't. We talked about this morning with my reactions to the picture of the defense as a whole following bringing back Tony DeAngelo. I still think Brett Pesce is going to be traded. I still think there's a decent chance that Teuvo Teravainen will be traded. They free up cap space to try to bring in a goal scorer that they want, because what, that was the other thing Waddell mentioned. He's always looking to make the team better, but as it is right now, they have less than $2 million in cap space, so there's really not a whole lot of moves they can make. But I think the way that cap space gets opened up is you trade a Brett Pesce, you trade a Teuvo Teravainen. So needless to say, we talked about this morning. I do not think the Hurricanes are done. This is not today's Aho extension is not the last piece of news we will hear about for the Hurricanes this offseason. I think there is still at least one trade to be had, maybe multiple. If you're looking at kind of like, you trade Pesce, you get the assets, you go get him for a goal scorer. Maybe they trade Pesce or Teravainen and use the cap space to go sign Vladimir Tarasenko. He's still a free agent. So there's still a lot of moving parts. And I do not think we are by any means set on the Hurricanes opening night roster right now.
Yeah, I don't either. I do think we're definitely going to see some more moves be made this offseason. I feel that this is really just one of the bigger ones that the Hurricanes will make this offseason, is just getting this Aho extension done. I agree with you. I think, there's a bunch of different routes they could go with these trades, because when you're trading a guy like Teuvo Teravainen, Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, you're not trading, a fringe NHL player. No, you're trading a good player, so they could very well get something good in return from another team, whether it be San Jose with Erik Karlsson, whether it be Calgary with Elias Lindholm. They have guys that could make these kinds of trades enticing for these other teams, and or on the flip side, you trade these guys, you could get a bunch of assets in return. You could get, if it's in terms of just a move to clear up cap space, to, like you said, sign Vladimir Tarasenko or what have you, you can get a decent haul in assets as well.
Yeah, and I think we could see these moves maybe start to happen sooner
Mhm.
because I touched on this morning, but Sebastian Aho is the number one piece. He's the number one piece of the puzzle. He's the first domino that you needed in this overall picture of these guys that are going to be UFAs after next year and setting up the overall look of your team. So if you're Dom Waddell and you're maybe wanting to leave the door open to try an extension with Brett Pesce before you trade him because of all he's meant to the Hurricanes, maybe okay, now you know what Aho's making. You have a clearer, you know what Andrei Svechnikov's making. You know what Jesperi Kokoniemi's making. You might know rough ballpark what you're going to have to budget for Jacob Slavin. Now you can go to Brett Pesce and really say, we've got our picture defined. Here's what we can offer you. Do you want it, or do you want to go somewhere else? Same with the other guys. I don't see them doing anything long term with Teuvo Teravainen, and I really don't. It's hard to picture it, but this I think gives them that clarity that they need to now start addressing all of these other situations that I don't think we were going to get an answer on one way or another until Sebastian Aho was done. A, because that gives you clarity on those things, like I just said, and B, because as we've heard and as we heard today, it's been Dom Waddell's top priority. So that's what he was focused on until it got done. Now he can turn his focus to some of these other situations.
Yeah, and it feels like the Hurricanes kind of had their offseason kind of mapped out. They had the initial, obviously the draft. Of course you had that, and then you had free agency, and it felt like they put a whole bunch of effort there into free agency with all the moves that they made with Dmitry Orlov, bringing back Jordan Staal, Jesper Fast, Dmitry Orlov. Did I say Dmitry Orlov? Michael Bunting. They made a lot of moves in free agency, and then all right, we're pretty much done here. Maybe aside, well, I think they are kind of done in the terms of free agency, maybe with the exception of a Tarasenko. And then now you're moving into all right, that's done. Let's get Aho, done, because you had a little bit more time to wait on those things. Free agents, you got to get that done then. So, and then now, like you said, it feels like now they can transition more into, all right, let's see what we can do for Brett Pesce, whether it be a trade or an extension. Brady, see what they can do with Brady Shea, see what they can do with Teuvo Teravainen. It feels like they're getting to that point of the offseason now.
Yeah, I think we're definitely there for sure.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the rest of this offseason pans out, what moves get made, because anything can happen on any given day. We've seen that time and time again. But, are there anything else? Is there anything else, Andrew, that really sticks out to you from this press conference, or things that you think could be on the horizon for the Hurricanes that are really big?
No, I don't think so. I think we've touched on everything pretty well. And I think, now it's just kind of a waiting game of seeing what other shoes are going to drop in terms of potential extensions, trades, free agent signings that might get made with cap space open from trades. I just, the one thing I am confident in, like I said, there will be more Hurricanes news in the months to come.
Yeah, I 110% agree there. So make sure you are following the show along on Twitter at LO_Hurricanes, myself on Twitter at Jared Ellis _96, Andrew on Twitter at ASchnitt53, because we're going to be talking about all these other moves that the Hurricanes are going to be making this offseason in future episodes. So make sure you have your notifications on whatever streaming platform you're listening to, and you're subscribed on YouTube as well. And we will talk to you guys in the next episode. And as always, folks, let's go Canes.